Once upon a time, there was a girl who met a boy, or a woman who met a man. And before we really go into the story, I have a job for you, but don't worry, it will be easy and effortless. All you have to do is listen and notice and pay attention. And as I share the story, your job is to notice where you as a man, if you're a man who's listening, may have been in your masculine role at certain times versus your feminine role at certain times. And when it may have been appropriate or inappropriate to be in one versus the other. Because you need both. There are times and circumstances in your life that will call for one or the other, no matter who you are. And if you're a woman listening, do the same thing. Because this is a story of a woman who was not honoring herself when her role was to be in the more feminine role, but she was choosing to take on a masculine role. And simultaneously, she was not honoring the masculine presence in her life in that moment when he was showing up in a way that would have allowed her to feel safe to show up in her feminine essence. But this was all new to her, so she didn't know what to do. And during the story, I will go in and out of storytelling and in and out of giving more direct lessons and teaching. Spoiler alert, the woman in the story is me. If you haven't guessed already. But the woman in this story is also representative of nearly every woman on this planet. And the man in this story is representative of nearly every man on this planet. So see if you can find yourself in the story. You see, just about 3 weeks ago, a woman was going to the gym. And so was a man. And they were about to get to the gym entrance door at the very same time. And as the woman was approaching, the man was still about maybe 40 feet away, and they were each maybe 20 feet away from the door. And the thoughts in this woman's mind was, oh, I want that man to open the door for me. Oh, yes, I do. And interestingly enough, the man decided to declare from about 30, 40 feet away, he said, oh, I'm opening that door for you. But he said it in a very masculine and assertive way. I'm opening that door for you. And the woman on the receiving end said, I'll let you. It was an instant magnetic moment between the two of them. She was so pleased with herself that she got exactly what she wanted in that moment. It was the perfect dynamic of masculine and feminine energy, and each one of them stepping into the role of it. And that felt amazing to each of them. Because when we know our role and we step into it and we play it out, it feels absolutely incredible. So then, they each checked themselves into the gym. Beep, beep. He went one direction to go to the water fountain. She went into the other direction to go to the women's locker room. As she was walking down, she stopped and paused and said, there's something different and special about this man. There was an assertiveness, a masculine energy that she's not used to. She was very drawn to this. So she stopped dead in her tracks, turned around, and walked right towards him. Because she wanted to make it so obvious that she was interested. There was something magnetic about this man. So she reached into her cute, colorful basket, grabbed her business card, which is to help men overcome pornography addiction, and handed it to him. And he was a little bit surprised. He said to her, "Wow, is this you? Is this really what you do? You help men with this?" And she proudly said, "Yes, that is what I do." Now, let's pause for a moment. Let's break this down. Because the moment that she stopped in her tracks, turned around and approached him, and gave him her business card, she had stepped into the masculine role. She had stepped into the masculine role. When in fact, her staying in her feminine role would have just been her going to the locker room, doing her thing, getting into her gym routine, and that would be that. And waiting for him to approach her, that would have been the true feminine essence had she stuck into it. Had she stuck to it. And this is why she dishonored her and him in that moment. One, she denied him the opportunity. She denied him the opportunity to step into his strong masculine role, which he was already in. He showed up strong like that. From the moment he said, "I'm opening that door for you." So let's break this down. Why did she stop in her tracks, pause, turn around, and give him her business card? There's multiple reasons. One, in her personal experience, through personal relationships, and a little bit about what society teaches, she has been taught that she cannot trust a man to step into that masculine role and fulfill that niche. And that has been an experience that has been reinforced to her so much that she felt like she had to make it so overtly obvious and undeniable that she did the approaching. And there are other ways to make it undeniable without her having to go into the masculine role. There is another reason. In her mind, she needs to know the immediate reaction of a man who realizes what she does for a living, for her purpose work, for her mission, for why she feels like she's here. And if it is intimidating to him, she knows that he is nowhere near in his masculine energy to the level that she craves, needs, and desires. And so it was a bit of a test as well. But it was not done in the right way. Not done in the best way, I'll say. And it was a dishonor to her because now she's denying herself of what she craves, wants, and needs from a man who could be a potential romantic interest. She needs him to be in his masculine leadership. The one who's doing the approaching, the leading, the guiding. And when he does that, and it feels good and right and safe for her, then she will naturally melt and surrender into the experience. And that surrendering into the experience is something that she craves deeply to the core essence of who she is. And in most cases, being totally unaware of it and living life in a way that is a mismatch for it, just like this woman had been doing. And that's why it was a dishonor to her and him. She was not creating the space for him to step up into the masculine role that he feels the best in when he is able to do it. And he can only do it when she creates a space for him to do this. And this woman at the gym denied him the opportunity and denied her the opportunity that she deeply craves and desires. So, after the water fountain incident, let's call it an incident, we each went, they each went their merry ways. He went to the men's locker room, she went to the women's locker room. And as she was working out, she's sitting there on one of the machines, and he walks right in front of her, and she notices. And he walked over to an area of the gym that no one else was over there. And she took this as an opportunity to go and walk up to him, which she did. Ooh, do you notice how she's stepping into the masculine role again? She's approaching him. She's approaching him. But there was a feminine dynamic to it. Let me share it with you and see if you can catch it before I tell you. She walked up to him and said, "Oh, I've always wanted to use this machine, but it's always intimidated me a little bit." In which he proceeded to adjust things to her height. And this was a machine where she was belly down, ass up. A very submissive and in surrender physical body pose. Now she stepped into her, let's see if you got it. There was a few different things going on here that's worth breaking down. She stepped into her masculine role when she approached him. But she stepped into her feminine role the moment she voiced that she was interested, both interested and intimidated, on learning the machine. She did not ask if he would show her. She waited to see if he would step up, which he did. Without words, he didn't say, "I'll teach you." He didn't use those words. But he said, "I'll teach you" in every other way. He gave a command, and I chose to willingly surrender to it. He said, "Get on." And he adjusted all of the things, and this was to work the hamstrings, in case you're curious. And he guided her and directed her and told her which weight to set it at, and told her how to move on the machine. And she created all of this space for him to step into his masculine energy, his masculine role. And after she had finished with the machine, they chatted for a little while. And he said to her, "Would you like my number?" He didn't ask for her number. That would have put him on the receiving end, which would have been more of a feminine role. He didn't ask anything of her or from her. He was in a place of giving, because that's the masculine role. And he didn't ask if he could give. These are the very important subtle nuances in language and words that are strong indicators of how much he's in his masculine energy, his masculine role. He didn't say, "Can I give you my number?" That has a bit of a neediness behind it. He said, "Would you like my number?" would you like my number? Not can I give it to you? Would you like my number? And in one simple word, she looked at him and said yes, in which she proceeded to enter his number and send him a text message right there on the spot in front of him. Although she unknowingly entered his number with one digit off. And when he hadn't responded, days went by after this interaction, and he hadn't responded. And her thought was just another man who can't handle the work that I do. The big, deep, important, powerful, and incredible work that I do when I am in a solid leadership position, as I am leading and guiding my clients, who are all men, to help overcome pornography addiction and other sex-related addictions and the big traumas that go along with it. And she thought to herself, there I go again, scaring off another man who can't handle the big work that I do with other men. A few days later, she hopped on a plane, went to Chicago for 10 days, visited family, came back, started going to the gym, and a few days after that, she ran into him at the gym. She was both nervous and excited at the same time. And he questioned her. He said, "Hey, I thought you were gonna text me." And they quickly figured out it was the wrong number. And then they just went on to do the day. And he was in his masculine role when he said, "Hey, I thought you were gonna text me." She didn't come up and say, "Hey, why didn't you respond to my text?" Now, during the interaction at the gym, she had come to learn that he is also a coach. He has coached men with addiction recovery. He's also a personal trainer, and she could see it on his body. He is a personal trainer. Those are some important details that we'll talk about more later. The part about him also being a coach. Now, there's some interesting dynamics going on here. They each had multiple layers of things that they were each wanting that they could potentially provide to each other. She's operating as a successful coach, and that's something that he wanted more of for himself. And so he viewed meeting her as a potential for him to learn certain things from her about running a successful coaching business. And the moment that he would want to be in the learning state from her would put her in her more masculine teaching, guiding, coaching role, and put him in his feminine, open, receptive, to learn, to receive role, and to be guided. And that's totally okay. There are times when it is fully appropriate and wonderful for us to shift in and out of our feminine and masculine roles, and that's an example of it. And one of the things that she had been wanting is to go to the gym with some direction rather than just being kind of squirrely about it and just playing around. Some direction of what to do at the gym with weightlifting in particular, because she never had experience with that. And he offered up to train her, and he made it clear that he was doing it because he was primarily interested in the purpose and passion on his heart, which is to be in a more embodied coaching role, but to be very successful at it in every way imaginable. So while there was definitely a romantic spark, there were also other things coming into play here. And without knowing it, this confused her. And when They met for the first time with intention, rather than just running into each other at the gym. It was at the gym. They hung out in his truck in the parking lot. And she really enjoyed herself and had a lot of fun. And he showed up in some quite remarkable ways that required a bit of courage and vulnerability. And the way that he was showing up in that night was nighttime at the parking lot in the gym, yes. That had put her into her masculine role, which she almost too naturally falls into, despite her being giggly and flirtatious and dressing girly. She would still be showing up in a masculine role without her awareness. Sometime in the middle of the interaction, her hanging out in his truck, being giggly and feminine, but then also very much so stepping into a coaching role. She had stepped into a coaching role because he truly did want to be in a place of learning. He showed up with incredible curiosity. And one of the things he said to her, he said, you sure are in your masculine energy a lot. And she giggled and said, yeah, you're right, I am. But here's the interesting thing. She knew he was right, even though she didn't understand why. There was a truth to his words that resonated with her on a visceral level that she had no choice but to fully agree with him in that moment. Even though she did not understand why, she knew, and it wasn't just the confidence in which he said it. There was a deeper, more visceral knowing than that. She didn't just agree because he said it with such certainty. There was something much deeper that resonated with her that she didn't even understand in that moment. And she was just in full agreement with him. And then they just went on to have their conversation. And she went on to still flutter in and out of the feminine and masculine role so much. And then the time was approaching where he needed to just get to the gym and get his workout in. He hadn't missed a day in like over 1,000 days. It's insane. Who is this man? And we parted ways. I mean, they parted ways. And then, a day or two later, it may have just been the next day, she receives a text from him. She's just going about her day, tending to the wood-burning stove, working on her business, recording videos, doing video editing. She had been singing and dancing and getting into her feminine, creative flow. And it was about 3:30 in the afternoon, she received a text message from him. And it said, "Hey, I'm nearby. Can I stop by and check out your ravens you told me about?" Ooh, and with excitement, she said, "Yeah, come on over." So he showed up about 10 minutes later, and she walked outside to greet him. She called in the ravens, and one of them flew in, but didn't come too close. They're wary of newcomers, and it was pretty chilly outside. And he mentioned being cold, and she immediately jumped in to try and fix it and said, "Oh, I can run in and get something for you," like as an attempt to alleviate the coldness. And he called her out and said, "When a man says he's cold, just let him be cold." And she was a little confused at that, because that was the type of behavior that in the past she had been praised for. And now she was hearing the opposite. And here's why in the past she had been praised for it, for that type of behavior. It was a type of mothering behavior where a masculine man does not want to be mothered. There are other ways of nurturing without being mothering. You see, the reason why this woman had been confused is because of her past experiences and never experiencing a romantic experience or the potential for one, where the man was in his masculine leadership in the dynamics of a relationship. Now, granted, she had been with men who were incredible leaders, but only in the workplace, but who did not lead or guide themselves, and definitely did not lead or guide the relationship, and was so far, far, far removed from it that she was the one left to fill that niche. But that's not where she wants to be, and that's not where she finds her strength and power. She has only done it in the past to fill a void when it wasn't her role to take. But she will always fill that void if the void remains void. This is happening at alarming rates everywhere, with women filling the void. And also, women need to learn how to step back and create the space, create the void, so that he, whoever the he is, has the space to fill that void, to step up into his masculine role. And in many, many times, many cases, the reason why he is not is because of an old emotional wound of the past that he has not yet resolved, that is creating subconscious patterning for him to show up in a more feminine way of not leading or guiding or directing or holding space or containing. If he's not doing that, then it forces her, whoever the her is in their relationship, to step up and do that. And she will if she needs to. And it's only from a place of self-protection. And she will attract a man who isn't filling the void when she herself has unresolved emotional wounds of the past that have her showing up in ways that has her filling the masculine role. And that's what was going on with her in this situation. And when a man came along who was actually in the strength of his masculinity and did not create a void, was filling it, she didn't need to try to fill the void, but it's the only thing she's ever known, so she kept taking the space away from him and dominating herself into a masculine role with certain things that she would do and say. And so let's go back to the story. They're hanging outside in the cold, watching one of the ravens who she had called in with her voice. And then she invited him into her home. And she walked towards the door and they walked in together. And it was so warm with the wood-burning stove going, and she had a nice meal that was cooking and it smelled aromatic and delicious. And he had this warm, relaxing feel that came over him when he entered her space in her home. And he took on such a dominant masculine energy there in a way where he felt so solid and comfortable and relaxed all at the same time. He took an open body language sprawl on her couch. And she went to go tend to the wood-burning stove and was standing by it and getting the heat. And at some point during the interaction, she said to him, "I could never live in a place that doesn't have a wood-burning stove. That's a non-negotiable." Wow, she so stepped into her masculine energy in that moment, which had been trained and reinforced into her for so long, that she felt like she needed to show up in this way. Now, let's rewind a little bit. Outside, when they were cold with the ravens, and he called out her masculine energy, he asked a very specific question. He said, in your past relationships, have you always done this, where you're trying to fix something with him? And I knew in that moment that the answer was yes, but I didn't have the courage to tell him that the answer was yes. And so my response instead was, I'm going to reflect on that. I'm really going to reflect on that. In which the following days, multiple days, many days, about 4 days in a row, she took such an incredibly deep dive into reflection. And that's what part 2 of this video is for. And that changed the trajectory of her life forever, in the exact way she needed. And she realizes now, in hindsight, what such a better way would have been to talk about her love of having a wood-burning stove in her home. And it would go something like this. When I have the warmth of the fire in my home, and I can just look over and I see it, and I can hear the crackling noises, and I can just get up and walk over and feel the immediate and immense warmth entering my body. It makes me feel safe and calm and grounded and centered. And I will always welcome something like that into my home. And not just welcome it, but create a space for it. And actively do what I need to make sure that that is something in my home. Because when I feel safe and grounded and present, it allows me to access my feminine energy, my feminine role even more. And when I am in my feminine energy, especially when I'm home alone, which is all day, every day, then that grounded centeredness allows me to access a creative flow and new ideas and inspiration. And these are things that are required of me, from me, for me, to operate at the highest level and to be of service to others in my purpose work at the highest level. And it allows me to also to soften in the ways that I need to, which can only happen when I feel safe and grounded and secure. And having a fire in my home allows me to have that and to access that. And I can create and produce better things from myself by having the warmth of a fire in my home. Now that would have been her way of saying how much she values having a fire in her home. That would have been the feminine way of communicating it. And instead, she said, I demand to have a fire in my home, no matter where I live. This is a non-negotiable. Now, which way sounds better to you when you hear it? And the other thing that she realized is that even though she loves splitting firewood and stacking it and starting the fire, all of the firewood duties, she loves it. And she reflected on this and she realized something that she would love even more would be if there was just that masculine presence in her life that wanted to step up and do it for her. Not because she's not capable, but because it feels good to do things for her. And this lesson of having a fire in the house was such a profound lesson for her, because it not only allows her to feel safe and secure, but it allows him to step up into a providing role. And she gets to be on the receiving end of it, of being safe and secure. He does all of the things that lead up to the warmth and the security, and she surrenders into it. And the firewood example is also a metaphor of the giving of the masculine and the receiving of the feminine. And over the next few days, when she took an incredible deep dive into a new awareness about her that had been bravely and boldly pointed out to her by this man, she could have just stayed in her ego, and her ego would have just brushed it aside and come up with reasons for why she was right in what she was doing or how she was showing up. And really, there's not a right or wrong to it, but there is a wounded aspect of her that was having her show up in this way. And because she did not use her ego to just defend herself with what she had been called out on, she went into a place of surrender, of full surrender. And she did not do this in his presence because she did not feel safe enough for that yet. After all, they barely knew each other. And she had never been taught or had experiences that would have allowed her to feel safe in a surrender like that to someone. So he was providing new and different things that she needed for her next stage of growth, her next stage of healing and leveling up. And so she did fully surrender starting the next day. And surrender, you may accidentally be thinking surrender as a weakness, but surrender requires both wisdom and courage. Surrender always requires wisdom and courage. And we only surrender when we know that what we are surrendering to is our best choice, our best option. And paradoxically, our best option usually requires courage. Paradoxically, our best option usually requires courage, which usually requires a softening, a dropping, a letting go of the ego. And one thing that this woman is a master in is when she has awareness of a new pattern within herself, she acts on it in a very solid and strong way. And that's what this woman did. She surrendered to her awareness, and that awareness allowed for incredibly deep subconscious healing and releasing of burdens that she had been carrying. And all she needed was the courage of a man so much in his masculine energy to call her out. But it wasn't in a judgmental way. It was a way out of curiosity on his end. He said it with a question that also simultaneously allowed for incredible growth on her part. But only if she chose to surrender to the truth of his wisdom that he was bringing to the table. And she has never surrendered so fully and quickly to a self-awareness. This was an awareness that was called out to her by a man who was fully in his masculine, and by a man who she felt a romantic spark with. That is a powerful, powerful combination. And when a man brings that to the table, he showed up with masculine leadership and called me out in the exact way I needed, that she needed. This is a story about a woman out there in the world. And this isn't the end of the story, and there were a lot of details I left out. And I'm gonna put part 2 of this in the description below. I recorded it a few days ago. I put on the same shirt to embody the energy of it. Oh. I want you to do these things. 1, write in the comment section below what you learned from this. 2, watch the video by Teal Swan called Masculine Containment. And 3, check out part 2 of this video, unlisted in the description.